Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Toto Wolff has given an update on the status of the W15, suggesting Mercedes have effectively switched all of their focus now to next year's car. Red Bull said this quite a while ago now that they've switched all their focus to the RB20. Will it be enough for Mercedes and others, even if they go all out for next year's car, to actually compete with the Red Bull next season? Very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. An update from Carlos Sainz to start us out. Yesterday we saw the rumours that he has signed some sort of pre-contract with Audi. These rumours were relatively badly substantiated, but they have been doing the rounds just because it kind of makes sense, to be honest, from a few different angles that we saw yesterday. In 2025, of course, next year he's still going to be at Ferrari, to our understanding. Now, Sainz has now denied this, or his camp has now denied this, and whenever things get denied quite quickly, I always think that they probably are true in some form or another, and apparently they say that Plan A is Ferrari, Plan B is Ferrari, and Plan C is Ferrari, which does seem to sound rather a lot like what the strategy team at Ferrari says over the radio. So they've got, all these different plans, it seems, Sainz, and yes, well, Vasseur said contracts won't be discussed until the end of 2023, but we know as of the latest rumours that Leclerc has quite possibly signed a new deal, and clearly he's the priority over Carlos Sainz. There's some rumours that they don't, Elkan and the others at Ferrari, not like they don't like Sainz per se, but they're not particularly keen to keep him around, is some of the theories that have been progressing, so we don't really know on that one, but I'd expect them to have a different lineup in 2025. Couple of stories on new tracks. Apparently, come 2025, there was meant to be a race that was 95% done and selected in Barranquilla, I'm guessing that's pronounced it, I'm not exactly sure to be honest, in Colombia, but someone messed up, and in the last minute, the plan fell through, and it's not happening anymore. And instead, this might still happen in 2028, is the current rumour, but in 2025, we're probably going to Madrid. We don't know about this one yet, but it's quite likely, and this is very frustrating as far as I'm concerned, because after all those years, they finally fixed the circuit to Barcelona, Catalonia by removing that final chicane. The track is actually much better now as far as I'm concerned, and yet, as soon as that arrives, it might well just be gone again, because they want to do, I think, the Spanish Grand Prix in Madrid. I don't think they'll do two Spanish Grand Prix, and that's where they want to have it. Another street track in Madrid. I'm not looking forward to it if it happens, but there's been loads of rumours over the last few weeks that this is going to happen, and it's now a strong contender, according to Formula Uno. Bit more drama. Helmut Marko saying it as it is on the Alpine Formula 1 side. Alpine has been a mess for a long time, we know this for sure, and Helmut Marko says straight up that Andretti should buy that team. That would be the best for everyone. Formula 1 would get its 10 teams, which most of the teams seem to want to keep 10 and not expand. Andretti can get in, actually have, they've got ambitious plans. Renault can be involved by supplying engines, because I believe when Andretti wanted to enter, they've had discussions with Renault and Alpine to actually, they can do the engines. So maybe there's a way in which that works for both parties. I would kind of be down to see that personally, but I guess if I was a French motorsport fan, I want my French Formula 1 team. And this is what Renault are now saying, and I find this hilarious comment, I've got to say, because just a few days ago, we were mentioning here in the channel on the videos about the French Ferrari as Alpine, meaning that as an insult, right? Now, okay, Ferrari has a lot of positive things around it, but they're not the best run Formula 1 team. There's no denying that, and the Tifosi wouldn't deny that. But Renault apparently are now saying straight up they want to be the French Ferrari. They want to have the passion around their fan base that the Ferrari fans and the Tifosi have. Alpine will become the French Ferrari because the fans don't have a team to support as Italy has with Ferrari. So they're true on that one, but there are so many issues, and I couldn't have said it better than this user here on Reddit that puts it together very nicely on just why they're doing quite a good job of being the French Ferrari in many ways. They've got the internal power struggles, they're firing their CEO and their team principals, their department seem to work without a common goal in place, they don't quite have the unlimited funding that is one of the things that holds them back, and Ferrari seem to, and also this one, ignoring critique from previous leadership. So many examples as to exactly why Ferrari have struggled over the last several years, and they're trying to take different steps, and there's all the politics that go on behind the scenes at Ferrari. It's the same thing at Alpine, right? And we called them the French Ferrari the other day just to take the mick, really, and now they want to be the French Ferrari, so they're trying their best is all I can say. Now on Ferrari, there's been a lot of talk about next year's Ferrari car, as there has been of all the teams around the grid, and Sainz has mentioned what is nonetheless an interesting point about the budget cap. I think there's no denying the budget cap has been unsuccessful in part, but it has its pros and its cons. I think it was only a few races ago where the gap between the fastest car in qualifying and the slowest car in qualifying was the closest it's ever been effectively in Formula 1 history. We have, in qualifying at least, the most tightly packed grid ever, and I think the budget gap and the testing regulations have had a part to play in that. The problem you find is when a team is significantly ahead in speed and in understanding of the regulations, as Red Bull presently is, the other teams, the Ferraris, the Mercedes, they can't just spend $450 million to catch up to them. It's not possible, and that Ferrari have their weaknesses. Sainz is talking about the kind of wind sensitivity of the car. They just don't have the money to solve it. And this is why now we see Mercedes and others are taking all their attention to next year because of the budget cap. So there's pros, there's cons, but it's likely in part contributing to why we see numbers like this for the current Formula 1 season, with Verstappen leading what will be, if he maintains this type of percentage, the most dominant Formula 1 season in history, hands down. And he's already leading the way in terms of laps led in the season so far in every Formula 1 season ever. There's never been a driver, I guess we can actually just look at the numbers real quick here, that has led this many laps. So the record is currently Jim Clark in 63. You've got to consider in many of these seasons there were plenty of retirements and other things. Like Schumacher 94 has got to be one of the most impressive on this list. He led 62% of laps that season, despite being like, was he not disqualified from a couple of races in the Benetton and just destroying his teammate? And I think like he didn't even, there was a couple of races that he DNF'd as well. So that season is remarkable, and the reliability nowadays is helping Verstappen's case, and we're only part way through the season, but he's led roughly 80% of laps so far, so he would have to lead roughly only 60% of laps from now to the end of the season to not break the record. So he's probably going to break the record as it stands. And Mercedes is sitting here like, all right, you can have the record. We don't care about that really. And, you know, it's not the most important record in the world. Mercedes are more interested in trying to bounce back next season.
Our season really didn't start well in Bahrain, but I think over the last races we've been able to comprehend the car a little bit better, and the race for P2 is really tight between Aston Martin, Ferrari, McLaren and ourselves. Now it's really focusing on what we need in order to be winning championships again. The positives are that we clearly see some development route that functions. We understand where we need to add performance. It's a frustrating process because it takes time to change a car fundamentally in the concept, in aerodynamics, but there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel. I think the main areas of improvement is just to give the drivers a more reliable car. It's not about the absolute amount of downforce, but it's just for them to know that the car is going to be stable when they turn into the corner, which isn't the case at the moment. The sales are set for 2024. Now with the car development almost stopped for this year. I find that good because there's so much we can optimize on the current car without looking too much onto upgrades. Let's see how we can really get it into more of a sweet spot whilst gaining lots of understanding for next year.
Now, I recognise there's quite a few Mercedes fans over the last couple of months that have kind of now, they start to say about Toto Wolff, and I get it, that this guy's all talk, right? Because Toto Wolff says a lot of stuff over the last couple of years, the progress they're making, the understanding of the car, and how much of it is actually translated into success on track for Mercedes, especially compared to where they've been for the last decade. Nothing particular, right? And Toto Wolff's at it again. Now, he can't really do much else, to be honest. He's not going to say that they're not taking strides and they don't understand where they're trying to go. But still, there's a lot of talk from Mercedes, and it hasn't really resulted in any tangible process. And as I've said before, for the last 14 seasons of Formula 1, only Red Bull and Mercedes have won anything. So if you're going to put money on any team to try and dethrone Red Bull, or at least have a challenge with them next season, which would be nice to have from a fan perspective, Mercedes are probably the team you've got to bank on. And they say they're in the right place for the winter, but they said this last year, so, you know, it's fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, I suppose, is what we might have again this season. So, in addition to what Toto Wolff says, Mike Elliott has also given his discussion on it and says that they have to choose a direction for the winter. They believe they have ourselves in the right place for the winter, as he says. We think we've sort of got ourselves into the right place. Doesn't sound like overwhelming confidence, but nonetheless, I'm sure they're looking at McLaren, I'm sure they're looking at Aston Martin, and there's some things to take. And he also also confirms what Toto Wolff said, that the primary focus is next year's car. Now, the regulations are so similar. There's, I think, a couple of tweaks maybe for next year's regs, but they're basically the same, such that they can test things on this year's car. Now, they're not technically allowed to like just throw anything on this year's car and chuck the same stuff on next year's, but the ideas they bring, some of the thoughts on setup and all this, they are bringing further upgrades, Mercedes, and Ike Elliott says at the end here that there are still some further packages to come. I can't say how much, so they are bringing more upgrades, Mercedes, but pretty much all of their focus now is on next year, and anything they bring will have the intention to increase their understanding for next year's design. And this, of course, is how it's always been in Formula 1. Even, I think it was James Allison said a few years ago that their 2019 car, they started designing in the later half of 2017. Like, they were, even back then, a long way out from when the season was starting. They were already working on their design. So it's always been like this. But with the budget cap, there's no longer the freedom to like upgrade to the max until the end of the season and still focus fully on next year. I think Mercedes are confident enough they can get P2 in the championship anyway, which is really what they're going for at this point. They've got the drivers, they've got the package, I think, on average to hold on to second place or extend their second place advantage, which I would kind of expect them to do, to be honest, now to the end of the season. And Hamilton's given his thoughts on this as well and said that, you know, usually when he's had a car that's not been the best, which has happened in the past, he's relied on his driving ability to make up for the deficits, but it's not always enough. He was talking about Silverstone and saying that for the first 13 corners, pretty much until like Maggotts and Beckett's and stuff, Chapel, Stowe and all this, they were doing pretty well in the slow speed. They were matching Max Verstappen in qualifying, but when they got to those corners, they just didn't have the performance to maintain that level. So, you know, Hamilton's obviously got a lot of driving ability. So does Max Verstappen though, right? So, you know, the car is making the difference. Nobody denies it. You need a great car to win in Formula 1. But it's not just Mercedes that are trying to make the best car next season. Aston Martin say that within 12 months, they reckon they can get there. But, you know, it's always difficult to read with these teams because a few races ago, I think it was Canada, both Aston Martin and Mercedes, there were rumours circulating that they were like one upgrade away from being as fast as Red Bull are. Now, we've seen a few upgrades from those teams, and they're still absolutely nowhere near. They're getting bodied by Verstappen and even Perez now again over the last couple of races. So Aston Martin say it's possible. McLaren, I'm sure, believe it might be possible as well. Lando Norris has also confirmed over the last couple of days that he did consider leaving McLaren, and in the back of my mind it has been there, but you know, now I guess he's somewhat more confident. But as I've said before, I'm not so confident that McLaren could actually become what Norris needs them to become if he is going to, you know, be the next British world champion, you could say. And just finally, before we close out the video, I thought this was rather surprising as far as I'm concerned. So Sergio Perez has won at the Overtake of the Month Awards, so congratulations. But it was for this overtake in Hungary against Oscar Piastri. So first of all, he's in a rocket ship, right? Which, okay, fine, it is what it is. So he's got DRS and his rocket ship, and he pulls out to the outside, and he looks like he's got the move done. He then has DRS again coming down this second straight, and at this point you've got to think that the move is now complete, right? But it's not really. Piastri actually fights back around the outside, and you guys know that Perez, you probably watched this move at the time live, basically pushes Piastri off the track. Now, this was quite a controversial move. Some people thought that maybe Perez should have given him more room and kind of forced him off the track. I'm probably going to say that it's hard and fair racing, but still, I think that giving this the award for Overtake of the Month, which is kind of on the verge of being a legitimate move or not, was a little bit surprising to me, to be honest, to say the least. But very much enjoyed to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.